is Riley Patterson, and I will be the moderator for today's panel. I'm a graduate from Purdue University with a degree in business, and I spend my time traveling across the country, moderating various panels in different environments. With us today, we have Matt Benavides, editor-in-chief of the national newspaper The Economist; Aaliyah Russell, St. Edward's University business graduate with an MBA from Penn State University. To my left is Ian Gallagher, chairman and CEO of Nike Incorporated. And last but not least, Alex Cardenas, professor of economics at Tulane University. To ensure a smooth panel today, we will be abiding by the following rules. Each panelist will have 1.5 minutes to answer a total of 2 questions. If they do exceed the time limit given, they will be cut off and we will move on to the next panelist. We ask that you guys hold all questions to the end of the presentation and that each panelist is respectful, not interrupting each other. Today's purpose of the panel is to discuss global outsourcing and the effects on the economy and other businesses. With us today, the audience, we have reporters and staff from Austin American Statesman, Wall Street Journal, and the New York Times. And Sienna, thank you for being with us. With that, we will go on to the first questions. Matt, how do you feel about company outsourcing and why?
As Riley stated, my name is Matthew Benavides, and I am the editor-in-chief for The Economist. And I am for companies outsourcing overseas for many reasons. One of them being that outsourcing increases globalization and opens trade, which is beneficial to all the parties because it reduces costs and increases productivity. Also, outsourcing causes economies to grow because of the increase in production, and it creates new jobs to both economies, the United States and overseas. A lot of people worry about the jobs that are being taken away from Americans here because of outsourcing, but you have to look at it as just because a job is given to somebody overseas doesn't mean that it's taken from here in the U.S. Because the economy is growing worldwide, it demands more workers. Additionally, the pro-outsourcing countries such as the U.S. and Great Britain have had large turnover rates and increase in jobs because of outsourcing. With this, also there are many other pros because of the outsourcing overseas. Time saving also occurs. Here in the U.S., companies work from, let's say, 9 a.m. to 5, and because of the time difference across the country or across the globe.
Unfortunately, Matt, I'm going to have to stop you right there. Aaliyah, your question is, how do you feel about outsourcing and why?
As Riley stated, my name is Aaliyah Russell, and I am a graduate of St. Edward's School of Business. After conducting research on outsourcing, I am opposed to outsourcing, and some reasons why are, according to the International Herald Tribune, outsourcing has grown tremendously in the last 20 years, and companies are choosing to outsource overseas due to cheaper labor rates, and this is causing the loss of jobs for many Americans. Not only are Americans losing jobs, they're also losing health insurance, and their unemployment benefits are becoming lower as well as a result of outsourcing. Another huge issue is the lack of education in America. Where the United States was once a leader, developing countries are now actually more educated than Americans today. This is resulting in the loss of jobs for Americans because the more educated people overseas are taking lower wages, so it's better for the companies to outsource. Another huge disadvantage of outsourcing is that the companies are outsourcing also to escape higher taxes in the United States, and rules are more flexible overseas for these companies that are deciding to outsource. So with all of those factors in consideration, it's a disadvantage for Americans.
Thank you, Aaliyah. Ian, how do you feel about outsourcing within your own company and why?
My name is Ian Gallagher, and I'm the chairman and CEO of Nike Incorporated, and I am pro outsourcing because when a company outsources, they can lower their production costs and they can lower costs from labor to they no longer have to buy machinery to manufacture their products. And when they lower production costs, then a company can focus their financial attention to actually developing products and making them better for the consumer instead of making them cheaper and trying to pass them off as better. When companies don't worry about the day-to-day manufacturing and production process, it's easier for them to focus their attention on getting products out to the consumers. It also creates supply chain flexibility in countries that have a strong infrastructure for manufacturing, like China and Mexico, as well as India. And then when one company decides, or one plant falls behind in production because of a problem, there's another plant that can potentially fill the void of the first one. It also, by outsourcing, you reduce the risk of a company because they are no longer liable for the actual manufacturing process. And when you reduce risk for both the company and potential shareholders, it becomes a much more attractive investment for investors.
Thank you. Alex, how do you feel about outsourcing within companies and why?
Like I just said, my name is Alex Cardenas, and I'm against outsourcing because of the unethical and dangerous working conditions that workers have to deal with overseas. Workers have to deal with long hours, getting underpaid, and normally they have to work with safety hazards in the workplace. Labor laws require overseas factories to pay their employees about $45 to $100 a month, depending on minimum wage, depending on where they live. And even though that seems low, it's reported that only 20% of the factories actually comply with this law. On average, workers actually get paid around 64 cents an hour. The labor laws also require a 45-hour work week maximum. It's being reported that 95% of the factories do not comply with this law, and workers have to deal with something closer to 60 to 100 hours of work a week. And these conditions the stress from these conditions can actually lead to literally life-threatening situations. A few years ago, Foxconn, which is a group of factories in China that produces Microsoft, Apple, and Hewlett-Packard products, was in the news because they had a string of 17 suicides in their factories. People kept killing them, jumping off the factory during work hours. And they actually had to put suicide nets around the building to prevent people from jumping off. And just a week and a half ago, Foxconn was in the news again because there was a huge 2,000 worker riot during working hours because of the frustration that the workers were feeling. And it's situations like this why I'm against outsourcing.
Thank you. Now moving around to the second round of questions, individualized. Matt, how does outsourcing benefit the U.S. economy?
Once again, I'm Matthew, and outsourcing benefits the U.S. economy by actually sending jobs overseas and stimulating trade. In the long run, it does help create more jobs. Immediately, the U.S. might lose some jobs, but because of the overseas new jobs created and the trade stimulation, more jobs are created because of the money saved and helping with the cutting of the costs. Philip Levy from the American Enterprise Institute believes that the money saved in such as wages and hourly rates and such as taxes, they can be used to create jobs here in the U.S. This is especially true with startup companies. Because many startup companies do not have enough money, if they outsource, they can pay lower wages to employees instead of having to pay a minimum of, let's say, like $7.25. And this causes them to have more money to invest in their company and make sure it actually gets going. So if they do not outsource, many companies might fail before they even begin. Also, inflation rates are kept low because prices of the goods are kept as low as possible by outsourcing. Without outsourcing, they have to pay higher taxes here, and the cost of goods are.
Thank you, Matt. Aaliyah, your question is, why is outsourcing a risk for business owners?
Once again, my name is Aaliyah, and I'm going to give you a quick fact real quick. 2008, Duke University and PricewaterhouseCoopers conducted a survey on outsourcing, and nearly 30% of all contracts were not renewed due to unrealistic client expectations. And some of these expectations were, according to Information Week, the lack of training from the company to the outsourced vendor. The company is all excited in the whole idea of outsourcing, and they're taking for granted that these vendors are being properly trained on the company's rules and regulations. And with this, the lack of ineffectual leadership is actually costing these companies in the long run, because they're outsourcing contracts for failures. So it's a huge risk for businesses to outsource if they're not specifically taking all these factors into consideration. Another huge risk for businesses to outsource is that they're putting their core competency into the hands of these vendors, which is giving these vendors then the opportunity to turn around and sell key information to the company's competition. So all in all, I think that the whole idea of outsourcing for businesses is a huge risk.
Thank you, Leah. Ian, what is the impact of outsourcing on your company's finances?
Well, Nike's success comes from a long history of innovation and taking what like someone would just see as a running shoe, and we would implement technology into the running shoe and then bring it back to the forefront and make it much more competitive. By lowering our production costs in outsourcing, we're able to take the money that we save from not having to manufacture anything and actually invest that in the development of technology used in our running shoes or in anything that we make. Our focus on technology just wouldn't have been possible had we continued to have to pay the taxes and everything if we decide to keep manufacturing in the United States. Because we took the savings that we got from outsourcing, and it actually lowered the final cost of the tennis shoe, and because of that, Nike sales actually raised 3% to $469 million, and then the actual total sales were up to $5.7 billion, and it's kept us really competitive in a downturned economy, and it just really helps us against the competition.
Thank you for that. Alex, are companies doing anything to improve working conditions in their offshore factories?
Yes, companies sometimes audit these overseas factories. They inspect the working conditions to see if they're up to the standards. A few years ago, Walmart actually did a inspection of 569 of their overseas factories and found that they had at least one violation each. Also, the Fair Labor Association recently reported that after a random inspection of 88 factories, the average number of violations was around 18 each. And this number could actually be higher because these factories have gotten really good at hiding these violations. Bloomberg magazine actually reported that there's a company in China called the Shanghai Corporate Responsibility Management Company that helps these factories pass their audits. They fake documents to present to the auditors. They coach them through questions that they might be asked, and actually give employees who are under the legal working age or that have complaints with the company, they give them the day off when the audit comes so they don't have to be seen. So, and even if they do get caught with these violations, according to the US labor laws, companies don't have to cut ties with these factories until their fourth offense. So they can continue to do these violations and still work with these companies. So they are doing something to help, but I don't feel like it's enough.
Once again, we'd like to say thank you to our audience and thank you panelists likewise. With that, we will move on to the next part of our panel, but not before we go over the recaps of each of our panelists' opinions. We have Matt Benavides, who is for outsourcing within companies because it helps increase globalization. Aaliyah Russell is against outsourcing because it contributes to America's unemployment rate. We have Ian Gallagher, who is pro-outsourcing because it allows companies to focus on better products and pass their savings on to the consumer. And lastly, Alex Cardenas is against outsourcing because of the inhumane working conditions and long-term negative effects it may have on other countries. With that, we'd like to open the floor to questions.
Were there any other concerns you came across while conducting your research about outsourcing?
I'd like to direct this to Leah. The question was, are there any other additional concerns you came across while doing your research?
Actually, there were some other things that I was concerned about. One, according to the Frog Post, First American generations are actually becoming the target of some hate crimes due to outsourcing, more particularly Indian Americans. Another factor was from Information Week. The lack of communication between vendor, from business to vendor, has actually led to a lack of communication between vendor to consumer. So all these are huge issues in outsourcing.
Right here.
Yes. How does your company deal with the negative connotation of outsourcing?
Okay, for this question was directed to Ian. The question was, how does your company deal with negative connotation of outsourcing?
Well, Nike in particular, we go through a rigorous process of screening our potential manufacturers as to avoid situations that Alex described. And so we not only take into consideration the cost that we would have to pay, but we also make sure that the work environment is safe for workers and that they're receiving fair pay relative to their country standards.
Right here.
Are there any negative effects on the cities and communities where jobs are being outsourced to?
So this will go to Alex. The question was, are there any negative effects on the cities and companies that your jobs are being outsourced to?
Yes, there actually are some. People assume that just because a community is getting more jobs that it's better for them, but there are some negative effects. For example, in New Delhi, there was an influx of new outsourcing jobs, which also led to a population boom. The only problem was that the city's infrastructure was not ready for it. It led to overpopulation, water shortages, and electricity shortages. Another concern about outsourcing is that private companies in these other countries are focusing mainly on bringing in jobs from other countries, and they're not focusing on setting up their own technologies and building their own things, which would, in the long run, actually help their economy, their community's economy better than just bringing in outsourcing jobs.
Next question? Yes.
How does global outsourcing help create international market?
How does global outsourcing help create an international market?
Well, global outsourcing helps create new markets by actually promoting global citizenship, and it helps recognize global talent. One example might be that there's software outsourcing in places like India, China, and the Philippines, but India really strives at creating these new technologies and producing them. So India is really the place a lot of companies turn to India because of this. And with this, it helps the companies which are purchasing the goods from India, and it helps India's economy.